How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but...
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired?
This is what real accountability looks like when someone in the room actually understands military operations. Congressman Seth Moulton, a Marine captain who led the 1st Platoon into Baghdad and served multiple combat tours in Iraq while working directly under General David Petraeus, methodically dismantled Pete Hegseth's defense. Hegseth insisted he couldn't say whether the launch times of F-18 fighter jets were classified, but Moulton saw right through it and set the perfect trap. He pointed out a simple contradiction. If it's not classified to say whether something is classified, then why keep dodging the question? Hegseth repeatedly claimed that everything coming from CENTCOM is automatically classified. But under pressure, he ended up admitting the information was classified, completely undermining his earlier defense. Then Moulton asked the question that mattered most. Would Hegseth take responsibility? He refused. The hearing only got worse from there. Moulton exposed the fact that Hegseth had fired 8 generals and admirals, yet couldn't clearly explain why any of them were removed. He also challenged him on the costly Houthi operation, which burned through hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars while failing to restore commercial shipping through the Red Sea. By the end of the exchange, Hegseth's entire defense had unraveled. This wasn't just another heated political hearing. It was a masterclass in exposing contradictions, delivered by someone with first-hand combat experience who knew exactly which questions to ask. Watch the full exchange.
Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no
it's a very simple question. Did it come from? It's a very simple question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the...
Okay, so everyone knows this Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah, what was the classification marking?
Because again, classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum.
You can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not trying to say anything.
Okay, that's what I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
As I pointed out at the time...
you said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
As I said at the time, Congressman, there were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
Okay, so if it comes back that it is classified, will you take accountability or not? We've already established, you've already admitted that it was classified because everything you get from CENTCOM is classified. You just explained that to me. That's how you justified not answering the question.
Not what I said. I didn't confirm any classification or
Okay, so if it is
what
confirmed,
I know is that
will you take
everything
accountability?
I share, everything I talk about,
Mr. Secretary, does accountability apply to you or not?
Is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary.
And you know what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our
I'm just asking if it applies to
very
you.
successfully.
I'm not asking about the
previous
Houthis.
administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on the battlefield,
I'm just asking about
we
I
actually
reclaim my
put them
time.
in a place
I
where
reclaim
they
my time.
called for a ceasefire.
I claim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question. We use leadership by example.
Of course. Unlike, I serve at the pleasure of the president like everybody else does.
So it only applies to the president, not to you.
I serve at the pleasure.
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told it's several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S. flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration,
The answer is zero.
military vessels transit.
No, I didn't ask about military vessels. I
which
asked
would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
How many
civilian and
commercial vessels?
transit.
It's been several weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have
Well,
transited the
would
Red
you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships
The
through
questions
dam
are not to
before
me,
military
Mr. Secretary,
ships?
they're to you.
We have responsibly put military
The answer is
ships
zero.
through first.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was the Army JAG fired? Why did you fire him?
they all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
No, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just asking you why.
That we
And
need
you
at
probably
this
learned
time.
at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we
Why
want better
did you
representation
fire
in
him?
each and every of those.
You can't
each and
explain
every
why
one
you
of those
fired any of
places.
them?
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth fired the Army's top officer, Randy George, asking him to put in his retirement papers and step aside effective immediately, according to a DoD official. George is a Biden nominee who had more than a year left in his 4-year term as Army Chief of Staff. His departure comes as the Washington Post reports 2 other Army generals have been shown the door. That's according to 2 defense officials who spoke on condition of anonymity. Want to bring in Washington Post Pentagon reporter Dan Lamothe. Dan, what's your understanding of what's happening here?
Secretary Hegseth has had an interest in kind of turning over the senior military leadership for some time here. He's been very pointed about doing so. He has not always explained why he's doing so. And there's a lot of frustration within the Army over that, particularly as not only these 3 gentlemen, but also several other names last year had presumed promotions that were blocked by Secretary Hegseth. In some cases, they would have become 4-star generals or taken on different 4-star general roles. Those positions also were blocked. So it's kind of a part of a larger pattern here.
Yeah, I was going to say none of this is happening in a vacuum because Hegseth has now removed more than a dozen senior military leaders from their positions, including all but 2 joint chiefs. You can see their names and faces on the screen. What's the impact of that, especially in the midst of an ongoing war with Iran?
I think the impact really is cumulative at some effect. The military is built where any one leader probably can be replaced, and within a short period of time, the military can move forward. But when you start taking out many leaders, multiple services, multiple joint chiefs, there's a cumulative effect to that where you start wondering how much institutional knowledge has been lost, how many points of contact that these generals have where they can reach back to allies, partners, adversaries, and affect change in a crisis.
Yeah, there's a reason that experience matters, especially in roles like this when the stakes are so high. And the stakes are so high given the news that we've been reporting over the course of the past hour. I wonder what you're hearing from your Pentagon sources about this search operation for an American pilot in Iran, if you have any sense of what led to that jet going down, too.
I don't at this point. I would note we did have fighter jets that went down earlier in the conflict. And in that case, they landed in Kuwait. Everybody was safe. This is a very different set of circumstances here with it being in Iran, potentially adversaries coming after the personnel down on the ground. I mean, there's a full crisis in the moment here to try and get these people back as quickly as possible.
Let's break down what just happened. Because this wasn't just another tense congressional hearing. It was a devastating lesson in accountability, delivered by someone who has actually led troops in combat. Seth Moulton isn't a politician speaking from theory. He's a Harvard-educated physicist, a decorated Marine officer who led an infantry platoon into Baghdad, and a veteran who volunteered for a fourth combat tour at the personal request of General David Petraeus. When he questioned Pete Hegseth, he brought decades of real-world military experience to the table, and it showed. From the very first question, Moulton exposed the cracks in Hegseth's defense over sharing sensitive operational details through signal. Hegseth tried to shield himself with circular arguments, insisting he couldn't discuss whether the launch times of F-18 fighter jets were classified, while refusing to admit whether the information had been marked as such. It was an obvious attempt to avoid responsibility. Moulton cut straight through the excuse with one simple point. Acknowledging whether something is classified isn't itself classified. That single observation cornered Hegseth. His effort to protect himself collided with the facts, and his explanation quickly unraveled. The criticism didn't end there. An Inspector General report later concluded that the original operational document had been marked secret, that Hegseth's signal messages closely matched that document, and that the disclosure created a genuine risk to U.S. pilots and mission success. According to the report, conduct like this could expose an enlisted service member to severe criminal consequences. Then Moulton shifted to another major issue, the Red Sea campaign. While Hegseth described the operation as a success, Moulton pointed to a much different reality. Nearly $1 billion had reportedly been spent on missiles, yet U.S.-flagged commercial ships still weren't returning to normal transit through the region. The gap between the public claims and the actual results was impossible to ignore. And then came the question that Hegseth couldn't answer. Why were 8 generals and admirals fired? For someone who frequently talks about accountability, Hegseth couldn't clearly explain the reasoning behind even one of those removals. Instead, he fell back on the claim that military leaders serve at the pleasure of the president, offering no professional standard, no strategic justification, and no evidence that the dismissals improved military readiness. By the end of the exchange, the bigger picture was impossible to miss. Questions about operational security, questions about leadership, questions about billions of taxpayer dollars, and repeated refusals to accept responsibility. Moulton's message was clear. America's service members deserve leaders who understand the consequences of their decisions, accept responsibility when they make mistakes, and lead with the same integrity expected of every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Guardian who serves this country. Watch the full exchange and decide for yourself who came prepared and who didn't.